Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about evolution. I'm going to teach you how this process works. I find this topic enthralling, and I'm confident you will find it enthralling as well. This topic has a lot of explanatory power. It allows us to trace back our origins. It even allows us to theorize about how life began. With this theory, we found out we're very related to other species. But what does that really mean? I want to start by showing you this picture, which we may all have seen before. It shows gradual change over time. It shows how we come from apes. Isn't it interesting? Darwin once wrote, "Natural selection acts only by taking advantage of slight successive variations. She can never take a great and sudden leap, but must advance by short and sure, though slow steps." This picture illustrates this very clearly. I'm going to explain you now how this really happens. We've all heard about DNA, right? But what is it? And what is it for? There is DNA in every living organism we know. We can find DNA in amoebas and in tigers. All cells have this molecule in their nucleus. Well, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a molecule that carries genetic instructions, contains information that determines an organism's characteristics, and is located in the cell's nucleus. It's composed of a sugar backbone and nucleotides, adenosine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine. DNA's code encodes chains of amino acids. This code is transported to machines called ribosomes. Ribosomes assemble chains of amino acids, which are then folded into proteins. Here is an example: hemoglobin. This protein transports oxygen through the blood. There is some code in our DNA that encodes for this protein. Species related to us have the same genes and the same proteins we do. A very important concept are mutations, which are differences or errors. Let's really tap into what a mutation is. Every time bacteria divide or replicate, which is another way to say they reproduce, they have to copy their whole DNA. Code that has all the organism's functions and characteristics. A protein unwinds DNA. The resulting strands are used as templates for the two desired copies of the DNA. And then an enzyme, called polymerase, binds adenosine with thymine and cytosine with guanine, but sometimes it makes mistakes and binds nucleotides incorrectly. And this allows for mutations. Can you see the error? Guanine is binding with adenosine. That is wrong. This is now a different amino acid chain, so it will have a different function, and this can be an advantage or a disadvantage. Let's return to our previous example. If the code encoding for hemoglobin mutated, hemoglobin would have a different shape, and so it will have a different function. The code in the DNA won't code for the same protein. It will code for a different protein. This mutation will have a positive or negative effect on the organism. If there is a problem, the organism will not survive, but more precisely, it will not reproduce or replicate. No organism will have the mutated DNA, and so none will have the defective protein. But if the mutation turns out beneficial, the organism will be more likely to thrive in life and to reproduce or replicate. So more organisms will have the beneficial protein in their DNA. Yes, these few mutations build a complex organism over time, in baby steps. Richard Dawkins, an evolutionary biologist, came up with a thought experiment called Wiesel program that illustrates this incremental progression. Imagine you were randomly typing in a computer a sentence 28 characters long. The probability of generating a specific sentence is 1 in 10 raised to the power of 40. That's 10 with 40 more zeros. In Richard Dawkins' words, it again begins by choosing a random sequence of 28 letters. Just as before, it duplicates it repeatedly, but with a certain chance of a random error, mutation, in the copying. The computer examines the mutant nonsense phrases, the progeny of the original phrase, and chooses the one which, however slightly, most resembles the target phrase. Methinks it is like a whistle. The computer chooses a random sequence of 28 letters. It duplicates it repeatedly, with a chance of random error or mutation. The computer then outputs the mutant nonsense phrase that, however slightly, most resembles the target phrase. Methinks it is like a whistle, the fittest one. The text you see right now is Richard Dawkins' program in the computer programming language Python. This program will print as output generation on generation, and you will see the slight progressive change. You can see highlighted in green the selected phrase in every generation, and you can see that each green baby step is copied and selected in every successive generation. There is no giant leap, but little leaps that add up. This simulation of natural selection reaches its target phrase at generation 70. Mutations are not as random as they sound, because the ones that are not fit are eliminated quickly, and the ones that are fit or match the target phrase, however slightly, copy, reproduce, and replicate more and more. People have tried to use the junkyard tornado thought experiment to prove natural selection wrong, but I'm going to show you why this is an incorrect analogy. People have tried to equate the possibility of life to that of a tornado sweeping through a junkyard assembling a Boeing 747 fully loaded and ready to fly. This is obviously wrong, as natural selection works in baby steps. It only makes giant leaps by the accumulation of small leaps. So a better analogy would look like this. First, the tornado sweeps through the junkyard and assembles wheels. And then the next sweep will assemble the frame of the airplane. And then the next sweep could assemble a Boeing 747 fully loaded and ready to fly. It is important to remember that each leap has to be made only once. Every successive plane has the characteristics of the previous one. Do you remember I mentioned this theory allows us to theorize how life began? Scientists use DNA to trace back our ancestors, and they built the tree of life. The phylogenetic tree of life. And we are over here. We all share a common ancestor, the first self-replicating entity.